Do you live on the big island of Hawaii? Do you live in Volcano Village, in Puna, in South Hilo, in Kau, in Namakanipaio, or anywhere near Hawaii Volcanoes National Park? Or maybe you're someone who has been following this eruption since the very beginning, since that December night in 2024 when the ground cracked open and lava returned to the Halemaumau crater and something extraordinary began. If any of that describes you, then what happened on the morning of June 1st, 2026 at 4:40 in the morning Hawaiian Standard Time is something you're going to want to understand fully, because history was made on that volcano, and not just the kind of history that gets a headline for a day and then disappears. This is the kind of history that gets written into the scientific record permanently. Kilauea's Halemaumau eruption has now officially broken the all-time world record for the most episodic fountaining events ever documented during a single eruption, a record that had stood for 40 years, that many scientists never believed they would see challenged in their lifetimes, and that has now been surpassed. And here is the thing that makes this so much more than a simple milestone. The eruption is not over. Episode 49 is coming. The tilt meters are telling the scientists exactly when. And what this volcano has been doing since December 23rd, 2024, what it has been building, what it has been releasing, what it has been accumulating again, over and over and over, is something that the people who have spent their careers studying volcanoes are calling one of the most extraordinary events in the written history of Hawaiian volcanism. You need to know the story, all of it. Let us start from the beginning, because to understand what just happened, you need to understand what this eruption has been from the moment it started, what it has been doing to the landscape, the air quality, and the communities of the Big Island for 18 months straight, and why the scientists at the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory are using words like unprecedented and extraordinary to describe something that, on the surface, looks like a familiar Hawaiian volcano doing what Hawaiian volcanoes do. On December 23rd, 2024, Kilauea volcano awakened at its summit. Lava returned to the Halemaumau crater, a vast bowl of volcanic rock sitting inside the broader Kīlauea caldera at the peak of one of the most active volcanoes on the face of the earth. The eruption that began that night was not like the eruptions that most people think of when they think of Kilauea. This was not a continuous river of lava slowly advancing across the landscape. This was something far more dramatic. This was an episodic fountaining eruption, a type of eruption so rare and so spectacular that it had only been witnessed 3 times in Kilauea's modern recorded history before this current sequence began. And it was doing something that no eruption at Kilauea had ever done in the written record. It was doing it again, and again, and again, and again. The pattern works like this. The eruption pauses. The volcano goes quiet. The vents in Halemaumau crater glow at night, and hot gases bubble and vent from the crater floor, but there is no active fountaining. Below the surface, something is happening that you cannot see with your eyes, but that the instruments of the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory record with extraordinary precision. Tilt meters placed around the summit of Kilauea measure the ground surface rising, slowly, steadily, microradians of upward movement every single day. As magma pushes into the shallow reservoir beneath Halemaumau and fills it from below like water filling a container, the scientists watch those numbers, they build forecast models around them, and when the tilt reaches a certain threshold, typically around 8 to 10 microradians of net inflation, they know what is coming. The reservoir is full. The pressure cannot be contained any longer. And then the mountain opens up. But here is the problem with calling this a pattern, because the word pattern implies something routine, something you can grow accustomed to, something that loses its ability to surprise. Nothing about what Kilauea has been doing since December 2024 is routine. Every single episode of lava fountaining that this eruption has produced has been an event of staggering natural power. Lava fountains shooting hundreds of feet into the sky, volcanic plumes rising thousands of feet above the crater. Tephra, the fine volcanic debris that the eruption hurls into the air, raining down on communities, on Highway 11, on campgrounds, on the rooftops of homes in Volcano Village and Mauna Loa estates and Ohio estates. This is not something happening in a safely distant, uninhabited wilderness. This is happening in a national park that sits adjacent to real communities where real people live, raise families, work farms, and sleep at night listening to the sound of the earth below them, doing something that the earth only does in very few places on this planet. And now it gets worse, or rather more extraordinary, depending on your perspective. Because what happened on the morning of June the 1st, 2026 was not just another episode. It was the 48th episode. And the 47th had already tied a record that had stood since the 1980s. And the 48th broke it. Let us talk about what the 48th episode actually looked like, because the numbers alone do not capture it. It began at 4:40 in the morning Hawaiian Standard Time on June 1st, 2026. Scientists from the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory had been watching the tilt meter data for days, knowing the episode was coming. The Wekahuna tilt meter near the summit had been recording steady inflation since the end of episode 47 on May 14th and 15th. The forecast models had already been telling HVO scientists that episode 48 was likely between June 13th and 16, but the volcano had its own schedule. In the hours before 4:40 a.m., precursory activity intensified, spattering at the south vent. Lava overflows building in the crater, the instruments showing that the threshold had been crossed. At 4:40 a.m., the north vent inside Halemaumau opened, and lava began to fountain. By the time the episode was at full strength, lava fountains were reaching nearly 650 feet, that is 200 meters, into the air from the north vent. The volcanic plume that rose above those fountains climbed to 24,000 feet above sea level. 24,000 feet. That is almost the cruising altitude of some commercial aircraft. That is a plume that was visible from an extraordinary distance. That is material being injected into the atmosphere at a rate that triggered an ashfall advisory from the National Weather Service for South and East Hawaii. Light to moderate tephra fell at overlooks within Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. It fell on Highway 11 near Namakanipaio Campground. It fell in Volcano Village. It fell in Mauna Loa Estates. It fell in Ohio Estates. The people who live in those communities woke up on the morning of June 1st, 2026, to find volcanic debris on their vehicles, their rooftops, their water tank catchment covers, their gardens. And all the while, the lava pouring from those fountains spread across the floor of Halemaumau crater. By the time episode 48 ended, abruptly, as these episodes often do, at 1:37 in the afternoon, 9 hours after it began, lava flows had covered 40% of the crater floor. Approximately 8 million cubic yards of new lava had been added to the crater in a single 9-hour event. This next part matters, because those 9 hours on June 1st were not just the 48th episode of a remarkable eruption. They were the episode that put this eruption into the record books permanently. Episode 48 of the Halemaumau eruption, which began December 23, 2024, has now officially surpassed the 47 high fountain episodes of the Pu'u ʻŌʻō eruption from 1983 to 1986. It is now the most episodic fountaining eruption ever recorded at Kīlauea. It is the most episodic fountaining eruption ever recorded in the written history of Hawaiian volcanism. And if you want to understand what that means, you need to know something about Pu'u ʻŌʻō, about what that eruption was, what it did, and why the scientists who witnessed it believed for 40 years that its record would never be broken. Pu'u began on January 3, 1983. It started the way many great volcanic stories start, with a crack in the ground, a fissure opening along Kilauea's east rift zone, magma forcing its way to the surface and beginning to flow. Within months, the eruption had focused at a single vent in the east rift zone, about 19 kilometers from the summit, and a cone was forming, a growing mountain of cinder and spatter and hardened lava that would eventually be named Pu'u ʻŌʻō. From that vent, over the next 3.5 years, a series of 44 high fountain episodes built that cone to 835 feet above the surrounding surface. The fountains occurred roughly every 3 to 4 weeks, each lasting about a day, each sending lava fountains 1,500 feet into the sky, even taller than anything the current Halemaumau eruption has produced. The flows from those episodes repeatedly entered the Royal Garden subdivision and destroyed 16 residences. By 1986, the eruption had covered 40 square kilometers of land on the Big Island. And then the episode count passed 47, and the character of the eruption changed. The fountaining phase gave way to a nearly continuous flow phase, and Pu'u ʻŌʻō went on to become the longest-running eruption in Kilauea's East Rift Zone in more than 500 years. It ran until 2018, 35 years. It destroyed 215 structures. It buried 14. 3 kilometers of highway under lava, as thick as 35 meters. It added 197 hectares of new land to the southeastern shore of the Big Island. It claimed entire neighborhoods. It was, by any measure, one of the most destructive volcanic events in American history. And the 47 fountaining episodes from the opening years of that eruption, 1983 to 1986, had stood as the world record for episodic fountaining at Kilauea ever since. Dr. Don Swanson, a scientist who was there to witness those Pu'u ʻŌʻō episodes firsthand, and who spent his career studying this volcano, said it plainly when episode 48 of the current eruption occurred. "I never thought I'd see that record touched." Another HVO scientist, geologist Katie Mulliken, noted that only 3 other eruptions in Kilauea's history had ever produced these episodic fountains. Kilauea Iki in 1959, Maunolu from 1969 to 1974, and Pu'u ʻŌʻō from 1983 onward. And none of them had produced more than 47 high fountain episodes in their episodic phase. The current Halemaumau eruption has now produced 48. Most people are missing what this means scientifically, because this is not just a record for the record books. This eruption is providing volcanologists with something genuinely unprecedented, an ongoing real-time window into how magma moves beneath Kilauea's summit, how the shallow reservoir system fills and empties, how the pressure cycles that drive episodic fountaining work, and how those cycles can be predicted with enough precision to give scientists a 3 to 4 day warning window before each event. One analyst called this one of the most forecastable eruptions on the planet. Think about that. A volcano that erupts with enough regularity and enough data-driven predictability that scientists can tell you days in advance, roughly, when the next episode will occur. That is not normal. That is not what volcanic eruptions usually look like, and it is happening because of the extraordinary monitoring infrastructure that the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory has built around Kilauea, tilt meters, seismometers, GPS stations, gas monitoring equipment, webcams, and because of the remarkable consistency of this eruption itself. The way the forecast model works is almost elegant in its simplicity, even though the geology behind it is anything but simple. Tilt meters at the summit measure how much the ground surface rises as magma fills the shallow reservoir beneath Halemaumau. The reservoir has a known capacity. Once the tilt reaches the threshold, typically 8 to 10 microradians of net inflation, the system is full enough to trigger fountaining. The rate of inflation tells scientists how fast the reservoir is filling, and from that rate, they can calculate approximately when it will reach the threshold. Episode 48 happened exactly when the models said it would. Episode 47 before it happened exactly when the models said it would. Every episode since late 2025 has been accurately forecast. It is a pressure cooker with a known capacity, and the instruments are measuring the pressure in real time. Before the current eruption, the third-place record for episodic fountaining at Kilauea belonged to the 1959 Kīlauea ʻŌʻō eruption, with just 17 episodes. 17. The gap between 17 and 47 was already enormous. The current eruption at 48 episodes has more than doubled what the 1959 Kīlauea ʻŌʻō eruption produced, and nearly doubled what the previous record holder, Pu'u, produced in its explosive opening years. That is not incrementally breaking a record. That is rewriting it. The 1959 Kīlauea ʻŌʻō eruption, for those who are not familiar with it, produced some of the tallest lava fountains ever recorded anywhere on Earth. Fountains that reached 1,900 feet into the sky, nearly twice the height of the Empire State Building. Those fountains created the Kilauea ʻŌʻō lava lake, which took years to solidify, and which visitors to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park still walk across today. 17 episodes was considered remarkable. Nobody imagined 48. But this is where it becomes dangerous to misread the story. Because the predictability of the cycle does not mean the eruption is safe. It does not mean the hazards are manageable. The 24,000-foot plume from episode 48 was the tallest plume this eruption has produced, shattering even the 20,000-foot plume from episode 46. That is a new record within the record. And during episode 41 on January 24th, 2026, lava fountains from both the north and south vents in Halemaumau reached at least one ashfall with 175 feet, 450 meters, into the air. Strong updrafts that day, combined with light winds blowing east and north, sent tephra over much of the district of Puna and into South Hilo and the eastern edge of Kau. People in communities miles from the crater woke up to find large clasts of reticulite, Pele's hair, and ash particles on their property. The park had to close. Highway closures were issued. And then, within hours, the episode ended, the volcano went quiet, and the tilt meters started recording inflation again. The cycle restarts every single time. The tilt meters switch from deflationary tilt to inflationary tilt almost the moment an episode ends. The ground surface begins to rise again within hours, the reservoir refilling from below, the pressure building back toward the next threshold crossing. During episode 48, the UWD tilt meter at Wekahuna recorded 17. 1 microradians of deflationary tilt over the course of those 9 hours of active fountaining. That is the ground surface dropping as magma drains from the shallow reservoir and erupts at the surface. Then, the moment the fountaining stopped at 1:37 p.m. on June 1st, the tilt reversed. Within days, it had recovered more than 15 of those 17, 1 microradians. The reservoir was already refilling. The machine was already resetting for episode 49. Now think about what the residents of Volcano Village have lived through since December 23rd, 2024. Think about the families in Mauna Loa estates who have had ashfall advisories issued over their homes not once, not twice, but again and again across 18 months of episodic eruptions. Think about the farmers in Puna trying to protect their crops from tephra. Think about the people who work at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, who have watched the park close and reopened dozens of times as each episode begins and ends. Think about the drivers on Highway 11 who have had to navigate roads dusted with volcanic ash and fine glass fibers from the fountaining events. These are not abstractions. These are real disruptions to real lives happening on a rhythm that the volcano itself sets. Roughly every 2 to 3 weeks, a 9-hour eruption, 650 to 1,500 feet of lava fountains, a plume climbing to the flight levels, and then silence until the pressure builds again. And there is something else about this eruption that deserves your full attention. During episode 48, as the 9 hours of fountaining were coming to an end on June 1st, USGS seismometers recorded 53 earthquakes, most smaller than magnitude 2, at depths up to 1, 5 kilometers below the ground surface beneath the south rim of Halemaumau crater. And then something unusual happened. An area along the south rim of Halemaumau rose by several inches, multiple centimeters of upward movement in the crater rim itself. The USGS noted that the specific cause of that uplift remains uncertain, but that it could be related to magma movement in an area not previously showing surface deformation. One more thing you need to know. Some of the monitoring stations that the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory relies on for data around the summit of Kilauea are currently offline. Several instruments, including the SDH tilt meter, remain inaccessible because the deep tephra field that is accumulated southwest of the caldera, the result of 48 episodes of eruption raining volcanic material across the landscape, has made physical access to those stations impossible. The eruption is literally burying its own monitoring infrastructure. Scientists are working to restore access, but right now there are gaps in the data network that add a layer of uncertainty to the forecast models. And tonight, as this video reaches you, that uncertainty is at maximum. Because episode 49 is imminent. As of the most recent USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory update issued on June 13, 2026, the Wekahuna tiltmeter at Kīlauea's summit has recorded 15. 8 microradians of inflationary tilt since the end of episode 48. The eruption threshold sits at approximately 8 to 10 microradians of net inflation. The tilt meter has already blown past that threshold. The reservoir is full. Bright glow is visible from both vents overnight. Degassing plumes are rising from Halemaumau during the day. Continuous tremor, the low-frequency vibration that indicates fluid moving through the volcano's internal plumbing, is being recorded. Every indicator is pointing in the same direction. Forecast models from the USGS indicate that episode 49 of lava fountaining is most likely to occur between June 14th and 15th, 2026. That is tomorrow. That is tonight. As you watch this video, the pressure inside the shallow reservoir beneath Halemaumau crater has already reached and exceeded the threshold that has triggered every single one of the previous 48 episodes. The only question is the exact moment the mountain decides to open. What happened next changed everything about how the volcanological community is thinking about this eruption and about what it means for Kilauea's future. Because the record has been broken, but the eruption has not ended. There is no indication that the Halemaumau eruption is winding down. The magma supply feeding it from depth appears robust. The inflation cycles are continuing normally. The SO2 emission rates between episodes, typically between 1,000 and 5,000 tons of sulfur dioxide per day, even during pauses, indicate an active and well-supplied volcanic system. Episode 49 will likely not be the last. Scientists believe this eruption could continue producing episodic fountaining events for weeks, months, or potentially even longer. The USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory has been clear about what that means for communities on the Big Island. The VOG, volcanic smog created when sulfur dioxide from the eruption reacts with water vapor, oxygen, and sunlight in the atmosphere, continues to affect air quality across the island and across the broader region depending on wind patterns. On days when the wind blows southwest, VOG can reach communities far from the volcano. People with respiratory conditions, children, the elderly, and anyone with compromised health are advised to monitor air quality conditions and limit outdoor exposure when VOG levels are elevated. Tephra and ash advisories will be issued each time a new episode begins and winds are in the wrong direction. And the ground around the caldera, the crater rim, the southwest side of Kilauea, remains in an area that has been closed to the public since late 2007 because the crater wall instability, ground cracking, and rockfall hazards in that zone are constant and real. Between episodes, the sulfur dioxide emission rate from Kilauea's summit varies between 1,000 and 5,000 tons per day. To put that in perspective, that is the equivalent of a large industrial facility pumping sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere continuously, every single day, around the clock, for 18 months. When that SO2 meets moisture in the atmosphere, it forms sulfuric acid aerosols, the haze that settles across the Kona and Hilo coasts and can sometimes extend hundreds of miles across the Pacific depending on trade wind conditions. Fog headaches, respiratory irritation, and air quality index spikes are a regular reality for Big Island residents who live downwind of the volcano. Some days it is barely noticeable. Other days the mountains disappear behind a gray haze and the air smells like sulfur, and parents keep children indoors. This is what living next to the most episodic fountaining eruption in recorded history actually looks like when the cameras are not pointed at the lava fountains. There is a historical comparison here that few people are making, and it is the one that puts this eruption in its true context. When Pu'u ʻŌʻō produced its 47 fountaining episodes between 1983 and 1986, those were the opening act of a 35-year volcanic catastrophe. The eruption that followed, the continuous flow phase that began in 1986, covered 6 square miles of the Big Island in lava. It destroyed 215 structures. It buried nearly 9 miles of highway. It buried entire neighborhoods. It added 439 acres of new land to the island by building lava deltas into the ocean. The Kalapana community, which once stood on the southeastern flank of Kīlauea, is gone, buried under tens of feet of lava, most of it delivered by an eruption that started with 47 high fountain episodes that people at the time thought were extraordinary. Now the current eruption has 48, and the magma supply shows no sign of exhausting itself. That does not mean the Halemaumau eruption is going to evolve into another Pu'u. The current eruption is at the summit, not on the East Rift Zone, and the flow dynamics are fundamentally different. The lava has been confined to Halemaumau crater and the southwest side of the caldera. Communities are not in the path of active flows in the way that Kalapana and Royal Gardens were during Pu'u, but the science is clear that eruptions at Kilauea's summit can and do evolve in character. The monitoring data from the East Rift Zone and the Southwest Rift Zone, which USGS checks daily, currently shows low rates of seismicity and ground deformation, and SO2 emissions from the rift zones remain below detection limits. For now, the eruption remains confined to the summit. But here is why this is serious in a way that goes beyond the record and the fountain heights and the plume altitudes and the crater floor coverage percentages. Every episode of this eruption deposits more tephra across the landscape surrounding Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. That tephra field is growing with each event. It is burying monitoring stations. It is closing hiking trails and overlooks repeatedly. And the sulfur dioxide being released into the atmosphere at rates of up to 5,000 tons per day during quiet pauses, and far more during active fountaining, is a long-duration public health consideration for the entire island that is easy to underestimate when you focus only on the spectacular visual drama of the fountain heights and the plume altitudes. This eruption is beautiful. The footage of these fountains, 650 feet, 1,000 feet, 400 feet, will offer 175 feet of glowing orange lava shooting into the Hawaiian sky above one of the most remarkable landscapes on Earth, is some of the most visually stunning volcanic imagery ever captured. Visitors who have been in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park during an active episode and watched the fountaining from the Wekahuna overlook describe it as one of the most profound experiences of their lives. Scientists from around the world have been studying this eruption because the data it is producing is genuinely unprecedented. But the record that was broken on June 1st, 2026 did not come free. It came at the cost of 18 months of air quality impacts on Big Island communities. It came with 48 individual ashfall events, 48 highway closures, 48 days when the national park shut its gates during active fountaining and reopened hours later when the tephra hazard had passed. It came with the steady accumulation of volcanic material on the rooftops and water catchment systems and gardens of people in Volcano Village and Puna and South Hilo who have been living with this eruption and as a constant feature of their daily reality since December 2024. As of this morning, June 14th, 2026, the Wekahuna tilt meter continues to show steady inflation at Kilauea's summit. The total inflationary tilt recorded since the end of episode 48 has reached 15. 8 microradians, well above the 8 to 10 microradians that the models have used as the eruption threshold for every episode in this sequence. Both vents in Halemaumau are glowing. Degassing plumes are visible. The tremor signals are present. And the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory has its scientists monitoring the data in real time, ready to issue notifications the moment the precursory activity that signals an episode's start is detected. Episode 49 of the most episodic fountaining eruption in recorded volcanic history is not a question of if, it is a question of hours. The pressure cooker is past full. The threshold has been exceeded. The history-making eruption that began on December 23, 2024, and that broke a 40-year-old world record on June 1, 2026, is about to write another chapter. Right now, beneath the floor of Halemaumau crater, something ancient and enormous is building toward its next release. The tilt meters are watching it happen. The seismometers are listening to it happen. The scientists of the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory are tracking every fraction of a microradian of upward ground movement. And the next time those instruments cross the threshold, the next time the mountain decides the pressure is enough, The north vent in Halemaumau will open, and lava will fountain into the Hawaiian sky for the 49th time, and the record will extend one episode further into territory that volcanology has never visited before. The atmosphere above the Big Island is changing tonight. The ground beneath Kilauea's summit is still rising. The record is broken, but the eruption is not finished. And this chapter of Kilauea's story, the chapter that began on December 23rd, 2024, and that is still being written right now, is far from over.